Hey all, this is Colin with Wireless Comtech, and today we're going to be taking a look at making a DOS thumb drive to run older radio software on. Now, the laptop I'm starting out with here is a Panasonic Toughbook CF19, and it's an earlier model. As you can see here, it has a 1 gigahertz Core 2 Duo CPU on it. 4 gigs of RAM. This one's running a 32-bit operating system on x64 based processor. We're actually running Windows 10 Enterprise LTSC 2019, which is the last LTSC 32-bit release. And what I'm going to be installing is DOS 7.1. Now, many of y'all are thinking, I've never heard of DOS 7.1. So why don't we do DOS 622 like we have here on the mystical, magical 3-floppy setup? Well, DOS 7.1 was more commonly referred to as the Windows 98 and Windows 95 underlay. So if you're quick history, Windows 95 and Windows 98 still ran on top of DOS. It wasn't until Windows XP that the transition to NT was commonplace. So the recovery disk for Windows 98 is actually straight DOS 7.1. So we're going to pop this in and install it a little bit of a funky way, but we're going to install it, and we're going to format the flash drive. We're going to make it bootable and make some changes and go from there. So I'm going to pop this into my floppy drive here. Hopefully you guys get to hear the glorious floppy sounds. And we're going to issue the reboot command here. And I'm also going to plug this 1 gigabyte USB flash drive into this computer. Alright, we are rebooting, and it should start booting on the floppy, and I hear the floppy spinning right now. Oh, looks like I'm going to need to remove that USB real quick. And now we're starting. Alright, we don't need CD support. What you would originally do with this is you could start it with CD support. So if you had a computer that you were upgrading or didn't have a CD drive, you could hook up some sort of CD drive, but it didn't have drivers for it in DOS 6.2. DOS 6.2.2. You could boot this and then load the CD support and load CD support, especially if your BIOS didn't support booting off of a CD-ROM, and then change directory over to that CD drive and run the Windows 98 setup. Much the same way that you can perform a net install with WinPE on a modern NT-based system. So we're preparing to start. We're getting everything going. And this part takes a minute because we are reading this off of a floppy. If we were doing this via other methods, it would be a lot quicker. Okay, diagnostic tools were successfully loaded to drive D. So let me tell you a bit about how this floppy works. Down here you see a bat file called set ramd. What that does is that actually goes in and decompresses the ebd.cab file, which and mounts it as the D drive, the recovery diagnostic drive, and with some extra tools. Now this floppy has had two or three programs added to it that I can think of off the top of my head. One being EMM 386, and the other being mode. So if we run mode real quick, and this is actually a test you should do before, if you're going to be doing this for radio programming, to make sure that the serial ports are recognized by DOS. Oops. And we get COM1 and COM2 under mode, so it is recognizing the hardware COM ports. A lot of the plug-and-play based COM devices, DOS will not recognize. So some newer hardware, which looks really promising because it has a hardware serial port, especially in the single board computer market, will not work for this. All right, so now we're going to run fdisk. Your computer has a disk larger than 512 megabytes. This version of Windows includes improved support for larger disks. So what this is essentially saying, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to go with DOS 7.1 versus DOS 6.22. DOS 6.22 is a 16-bit operating system. DOS 7 is 32-bit. And this will provide some easier backwards compatibility later between when you're wanting to drag and drop files between Windows 7, Windows 10, or in this thumb drive. So we're going to proceed. Yes. All right, so now we're going to display our partition information. Let's see, we've got our DOS primary at C test. Okay, so this is our 1 gigabyte drive. So we're selected the correct drive, so we don't need to change. We are going to first off delete the partition. So 1 and 1, and we're going to delete test. Are we sure? Yes. Escape to continue. Now we're going to create a new DOS partition. We're going to create a primary partition. Yes, we're going to use the full 959 megabytes. And we're going to make sure it's the active partition. So status is A for active, so we don't need to verify that, but we did verify it. Now we are going to run escape, and we say you must restart your system for the changes to take effect. That is all right, so I will issue the restart command here. And we'll get back to you when we've rebooted. Alright, and we are back, and I did have to manually select the boot device to force a floppy boot because it keeps trying to boot off of the USB thumb drive with this particular laptop, the way I have the BIOS set up. Not a big deal, just something to keep an eye out about. So let's continue. Now we're going to format, but we're going to use the help menu to show us how to format our disk. All right. RAM drive, real mode CD, EDB cab. Let's see, what else do we need? All right. As soon as I found it here. Okay, format. Format X, and then type /S. So now we're gonna Alt F X. All right, so format C/S. All data will be erased? Yes. Alright, it's finishing up here. Quick reminder, the S flag we used in the format command is to make the drive bootable. And this should not take several minutes, but there we go. We're going to call this DOS 7.1. Alrighty, and now we need to copy all the startup files over to the C drive or our flash drive. So we're going to use the sys command, and we're going to tell it C is the target. Alright, transferred. And now we are going to go to our C drive and make directory DOS. Now we're going to go back to A, and we are going to copy to C DOS. For those who are familiar with Linux, keep in mind DOS uses backslashes, not forward slashes. So you do have to for file paths, you do have to use backslashes. Though the flags are forward slashes instead of the little dashes. Those, don't remember what those are called, but this is, we're reading the floppy and literally copying everything over to it. Everything that is not hidden by the system, which would be the startup files, which we already copied. And some of this stuff we're not going to need later on, but it'll still be there because, you know, we've got a gig of storage, and this is all running from a 1.44 megabyte floppy. All right, now we're going to go do the same thing in D. There are some reused files, and that is simply because this in the event that you need to run your or remove your floppy drive to put in another, or remove your floppy disk to put another floppy. You're running off of your RAM drive and executing commands off the RAM drive. All right, now we need to go to C again, and we need to run atrib, and we are looking for that ms-dos.sys. What we're going to do now is, if we were to reboot right now, we would see a Windows 98 splash screen. We're going to go ahead and disable that, so we need to first make it to where we can see the ms-dos.sys, or edit, I should say, the ms-dos.sys. So we're going to atrib -shr, and now we're going to go edit ms-dos.sys. All right. Oops. And now we're going to options, logo equals 0, and now we need to tell the system registry not to complain about that, so zero. Alt F S Alt F X. Alright, now we need to put the atrib files back to how they should be. And at the moment, our local path is on the floppy drive, which is why you will hear, when I run execute atrib here, you may hear the floppy drive spin up. And now we need to create a auto exec. So edit. Oops. No, this will work. At echo off set path equals dot DOS. That means when we execute files, when we're just in C or anywhere else, it'll know to look in the DOS directory for those files. And now we also need to echo ms DOS 7.1. And that's just a because I can. FA, and we are going to save this as autoexec.bat. We're going to hit OK. And now we can exit. And now we're going to restart and remove the floppy disk and then restart. So the floppy is out of the floppy drive. Wait for my screen capture device to catch up here. And as you can see, it says starting Windows 98 MS-DOS 7.1. So we are now operating DOS. So if we hit dir here, directory, you can see we have the autoexec file and DOS, the DOS directory. So if I say fdisk, as you can see, it ran fdisk, which was not in our root path there. Because fdisk is sitting up here in the DOS directory. And that's pretty much it for installing DOS. Alright, so we've installed DOS, and we now have a DOS operating system on a floppy drive. So there's some more things to do, but we're going to save that for another video, and I'm probably going to end up switching this over to a VM just for convenience and speed, since I have images of all of my DOS software as floppy images that I can just continuously pop in and out virtually of ESXi, and it goes a lot quicker because we're reading at whatever the bus speed for the network drives are. So instead of reading this at floppy speeds, and we also get much better, much better video out of it. So anyway, stay tuned for the next part. I'm going to be covering some of the extra little add-ons, as well as installing a copy of an RSS, a Motorola RSS that has an installer executable with it, in addition to making a copy of a program that does not have an installer executable to it, and basically doing all of the hard work that the installer would do for us. So hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.